Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, ready? I think maybe, I don't think we need the fan. You need the fan? Yeah, it makes noise and it's not that hot today. Okay, I think everybody's settled in. Okay, so today is Saturday. This is Saturday morning, the 9 o'clock session. And so we'll begin with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so we are exploring now dependent origination. And first, before we proceed further, I want to give some word explanation of dependent origination. So we have, let me get my... Okay, so this long Pali word, which is translated as dependent origination, is what we call a compound made up of two words, paticca and samuppada. The word paticca is originally an absolutive. Does everybody, I assume everybody knows what an absolutive is? Yeah, it's a specialized word in Pali and Sanskrit grammar and other types of grammar. Okay, so it's formed from a verb. The verb comes out in Pali as pacheti, which is derived from a prefix, pati, plus the main verb is eti. So the verb eti means either to go or to come. And then the prefix pati has the sense of going back to. So, or back towards, or something like a reflexive sense. So the verb pacheti means to go back to fall back upon, and then a derived meaning to rely upon, to depend upon. And so what happens in Pali when you combine the prefix with the main part of the verb, we get this meeting of two vowels which won't stand in Pali. So what happens is that first, when the I meets the E, the I turns into a Y. So we would get patyeti. But then when you have this combination of two consonants, that also doesn't stand in Pali. It's unstable. So it turns into a double C. So we get pacheti is the verb. So literally to fall back upon, to rely upon, to depend upon. And then from this we get the absolutive. The absolutive is a verbal form which has the meaning of somewhat like, okay, in English we say, I went to the store. Okay, so that's a regular past form of the verb went. But if I say, having gone to the store, I bought some bread. So having gone, that would be the equivalent of an absolutive in Pali. So paticca is having depended upon. Literally, it's having depended upon. And so we translate it rather freely in English as dependent, but literally it's having depended upon. And then samupada is from, sort of the stem word is upada, which means arising. And then it has the prefix sam, which introduces the idea of complexity. So it's a rather complex, it's not a simple arising, but a complex arising, because it involves a multitude of conditions. And it's an arising which takes place in dependence upon certain conditions. So this is why we translate it dependent origination. There's a popular translation, interdependent arising or interdependent co-origination. I think not quite accurate, because as we'll see, some of the factors are interdependent, the relationship, but not all of them. For example, we say old age and death depends upon birth, but birth doesn't depend on old age and death. Okay, the Visuddhimagga, our rather formidable commentary, gives some explanation of dependent origination, a verbal explanation. Let's find it. Okay, I'll go through this lightly, because sometimes it's expressed in the rather heavy technical terminology typical of dependent origination when applied to the total of states produced from total conditionality must be taken in two ways. Maybe this is the best part. Okay, so it arises as a togetherness, thus it is a co-arising. That's the samupada, but it does so having depended in combination with conditions, not regardless of them. Consequently, it having depended is a co-arising. Thus, in this way, also it is dependent origination. And the total of causes, a condition for that total of states produced from the conditionality. So because it is a condition for that, this total of causes is called dependent origination. Okay, so the word dependent, paticca, indicates the combination of the conditions, since states in the process of occurring exist in dependence on the combining of their conditions. And then the word origination indicates the arising of the states, since these occur when their conditions combine. Okay, I think maybe that's enough from the Visuddhimagga. And now there's two ways in which we should understand this expression, dependent origination. I call these two ways, first as a structural principle, and then the application of that structural principle to the particular problem that the Buddha's teaching is intended to solve, the problem of dukkha or suffering. So as what I call a structural principle, well, this is the abstract principle that lies behind dependent origination. And this is the principle that's expressed in Pali as a kind of formula. So maybe we read together phrase by phrase so that it gets imprinted in your mind. So, imasmin sati idang hoti. So, imasmin sati means when this exists, then idang hoti, that comes to be. Okay, then the second part, imas upada, idang upajati. So imas upada indicates with the arising of this, or through the arising of this, that arises. So we have the first part of this principle expressed in two ways. One is the existence of one thing in dependence on another thing. For this to exist, that must exist. And then the other way it's expressed is in terms of origination. Through the arising of this thing, that thing arises. And so it's the arising of this that brings about the arising of that. So the first part is expressed in terms of existence, call it dependent existence. The second part expressed by way of dependent arising or conditioned arising. And then the converse of the formula deals with cessation. So, imasmin asati, idang nahoti. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. And then the other side, the other aspect, imasa nirodha, idang nirujati. With the cessation of this, that ceases. Or through the cessation of this, that ceases. So again, this is expressed in terms of, on one side, in terms of existence or non-existence, the non-existence of the effect if the condition doesn't exist. And then the other side, with the ceasing of the condition, the effect ceases. And so this is, I call, the structural principle. It's the principle that lies behind the standard formula of dependent origination. And we can apply this, in fact, the suttas apply this principle in many different ways. So we could apply it even to the understanding of social conditions. So there are suttas where the Buddha speaks about how when there's poverty, then crime arises. When there's crime, then social degeneration takes place. Then punishment occurs. When there's punishment, then conflict breaks out. So all of this is applied to social conditions by way of this existing, that comes to be. But the main application of dependent origination is to the problem of dukkha, the problem of, call it the samsaric suffering. And so in this is the usual definition that the Buddha gives of dependent origination. For example, this is the opening sutta in the chapter on dependent origination in the Samyutta Nikaya. Here the Buddha says, I will teach you dependent origination. And what is dependent origination? So this is the standard 12-term formula. With ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, there is name and form. With name and form as condition, there are the 6 sense bases. With the 6 sense bases as condition, there is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. With feeling as condition, there is craving. With craving as condition, there is clinging. With clinging as condition, there is existence. With existence as condition, there is birth. With birth as condition, there is aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair come to be. That is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. So this is called dependent origination. And then just as origination takes place through conditions, it's with the cessation of the conditions that there comes the cessation of the result or the effect. So with the cessation of ignorance comes cessation of the volitional formations, all the ways down. With the cessation of birth, there comes the cessation of old age and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair. Okay, so this is the standard formula of dependent origination, which is generally taken to be a description, I call it a description of the causal dynamics of samsara. And so I'll just give first a general synopsis of the meaning of the 12 factors as they're grouped together. And then we'll explore the definitions of the factors going through individual suttas. Okay, so what it's saying is that because of this fundamental ignorance, which has been lying, at least dormant, in the mind streams of sentient beings through beginningless time, we engage in various activities, ethical or wholesome and unwholesome activities which generate karma. Those activities are called sankharas. The Pali word is sankhara, which is translated here, volitional formations. Or we could also say volitional activities. And these volitional activities, accompanied by ignorance, bring about at death a re-arising of consciousness. They propel consciousness into a new mode of existence so that the stream of consciousness continues beyond death into the beginning of a new existence. And when consciousness arises, it arises together with what's called name and form, nama rupa, which signifies the psychophysical complex that accompanies consciousness. So any given existence consists of consciousness functioning together with the psychophysical complex called name and form. Okay, then as name and form, the psychophysical complex, begin to develop from the moment of conception on through the stages of embryonic development, there emerge the 6 sense bases. This is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, physical body, and the mind base. Then as we come out into the world, equipped with these 6 sense bases, we make contact with the corresponding objects. Each sense base contacts its corresponding object, and out of that contact, there occurs a feeling. Feeling in the sense not of emotions, but pleasant feeling, painful feeling, neutral feeling. I call this the feeling tone that accompanies every experience. Then in response to this feeling, as long as ignorance is still lying present in the mind stream, through these feelings, there arises craving, the craving to acquire and to enjoy the pleasant feelings, the craving to escape from the painful, disagreeable feelings, or the craving that just settles in to the calm and peaceful, neutral feelings. Okay, when this craving intensifies, it gives rise to clinging. And conditioned by clinging, we engage in a new round of activities, volitional activities, karmic activities, activities that create karma with the potential to bring about a new existence. And so that clinging generates the karmic activities, or we call this the karmically constructive side of existence. And those karmic activities direct the stream of consciousness towards one or another state of existence in the future. And then that new existence begins with birth. And then once birth takes place, once we arise in a new state of existence, the birth is inevitably followed by aging and death, or some maybe don't have the fortune even to reach aging, but right after birth, they can undergo death. But in the normal case, birth is followed by old age and death. And then in the course of life, one meets sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair. And so if we look at this, we could actually see that there are sort of two chains which are running parallel to each other. Yeah, I see here like one chain goes from ignorance to these volitional formations, from the volitional formations to consciousness, and then consciousness to name and form. And what we call a given life is this continual interplay of consciousness and name and form, or the psychophysical complex. So this is one series, and then the parallel series, which is just expressing the same process in somewhat different terms. So along with ignorance, we have craving and clinging. And then the volitional formations are karmic activities. And what is meant by existence is also the karmically constructive side of existence. And this gives rise, this karmically constructive side of existence gives rise to, again, to consciousness and name and form. And consciousness and name and form is what undergoes birth and then undergoes aging and death. And then to show how we move from name and form to craving, the sutta draws out the 6 sense spaces, which are actually inherent in name and form, but they're pulled out and treated separately. And then through the 6 sense spaces, one makes contact with the world, the objects of the world. And from those objects, there arises feeling. And then from feeling, we come up to craving. And so we could just sort of put these in suspension. And so the essential links in dependent origination go from ignorance to consciousness and name and form, and then from craving and clinging to new existence. And the new existence creates a new complex of consciousness together with name and form. And when there's consciousness and name and form, that is what undergoes birth and then undergoes old age and death. Okay, now I want to move into some of these suttas that deal with dependent origination. And what I'm going to take is a sutta which gives a definition of the factors going in reverse order. So this is the second sutta of the Nidana Samyutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, in which the Buddha says, I will teach you dependent origination and I will analyze it for you. Okay, so this sutta is going to show us the meanings of these terms in the sequence of the 12-fold sequence of dependent origination. Okay, so first the Buddha runs through the whole series in direct order from beginning with ignorance to the end with old age and death. And now he's going to define them starting from the end and working backwards. And so he starts with old age and death, or aging and death. And so first, what we have with aging and death, it's a compound of two terms. And so first he breaks this compound down and then defines each term separately. First, aging, and then death. So what is aging or old age? So it is the aging of the various beings in the various orders or realms of beings. So there are many different realms of existence according to the Buddha's cosmology, but in all of these realms of existence, the living beings dwelling there grow old. That is part of the nature of life. So they are growing old. And then the next terms refer specifically to what we observe in human life: the breaking of the teeth, graying of the hair, wrinkling of the skin. So three manifest signs of old age or increasing age. And so, well, we try to avoid the breaking of the teeth. We put in false teeth. We can't avoid the graying of the hair, but it used to be many women would dye their hair. Now, both men and women dye their hair to escape the graying. Then the wrinkling of the skin, we have all sorts of cosmetics to cover up the wrinkling of the skin, make the skin fresh and smooth and beautiful. Okay, but then there's the decline of vitality. So when you're young, you can play baseball and football and run track and do all sorts of sports. And you always have a lot of energy. As you get older, then the energy starts to decline, become weaker and feeble, until when you're really old and you have to walk with a walking stick. Sometimes the suttas speak about the old person walking with the bent back, leaning on the walking stick. Then there comes the degeneration of the faculties, or the decline of the faculties. So when we're young, we could see in the distance very clearly. When you get older, even when you reach your early 20s, a lot of people, they become nearsighted, so they need eyeglasses to see in the distance. When you get still older, then you need eyeglasses to see things close up. Then the hearing starts to weaken, so that at some point you might need hearing aid, or you have to ask people to speak louder. And then the sense of taste declines, so that the food doesn't taste as vibrant as it did in one's early years, so the faculties decline. So those are some of the signs of aging, of growing old. Okay, then the next term in this compound is what we're always trying to evade or to avoid, to escape from: death. And here it's defined as the passing away of the various beings. from the various orders of beings, their perishing, breakup, disappearance, mortality, death, completion of time. The Pali word here is, I think it's kalankara. So doing one's time, completing one's time, the breakup of the aggregates and the laying down of the carcass, the body. So these are various synonyms for death. And sometimes I've read some explanations of dependent origination by people who try to say that these terms, old age and death, should be taken as metaphors for changes in states of mind. So that old age is the decline of the mind moment and death is the vanishing of the mind moment. But you could see here that these definitions are just very, very clear, direct, using everyday terms to explain what we normally think of as old age and death. So it's clear to me that old age and death should be taken literally, independent origination. Okay, then we come to birth. So what is birth? So first, the text uses some conventional terms for birth. And actually, strictly speaking, what's meant by jati would be conception. In the case of a human being, conception in the womb, rather than the coming out from the womb. So it's the birth of the various beings into the various orders of beings. They're being born, the descent, okanti, it's the entrance into the womb, the production. Then we have two definitions, more technical definitions of birth. The manifestation of the aggregates, that is, at birth, it's the coming into being of the 5 aggregates that constitute the sentient being or the person. The aggregate of material form, feeling, perception, the sankharas or volitional formations, and consciousness. So at the moment of conception, one acquires, or these 5 aggregates come into being. And then the last is the obtaining of the sense bases. So acquiring the sense bases. As we're going to see, the acquiring of the sense bases in the case of a human life takes place in sequence. We don't acquire all 6 sense bases at the very moment of conception. But what's acquired at the moment of conception is the body base and the mind base. The other sense bases appear during the period of gestation in the womb. Okay, so this is birth. We could take it at the simplest level, the manifestation of the aggregates. Okay, so then we come to the next factor, existence. So what is existence? And the text just defines existence in terms of existence in the 3 realms. So the Buddhist texts speak about 3 realms of existence. So there's the kama dhatu, the rupa dhatu, the arupa dhatu. These are the 3 realms. So the kama dhatu is what we sometimes translate as the sense sphere realm. or the desire realm. So it's the realm of existence in which sensual experience is predominant and in which sensual desire is predominant. In terms of Buddhist cosmology, the sense sphere realm includes going from the bottom up, the various hells, the animal realm, the realm of the pretas, sometimes translated hungry ghosts, or we could translate maybe the afflicted spirits. So these are the three unhappy or unfortunate realms of rebirth in the desire realm. But then we come to the happier realms. So we have the human realm, and then we have various sense sphere heavenly realms. So there are 6 of these. We don't have to go into them individually. So we have these 5 types of existence within the sense sphere realm. Okay, but then above and beyond the sense sphere realm, there's another realm called the rupa dhatu, which we sometimes translate the fine material realm or the form realm. And this is a realm that's something like 16 divine planes of existence. 3, 3, 3, 9. I don't remember the exact number, but these are the realms that correspond to the 4 jhanas. So the jhanas are the stages of meditative absorption. And when a person attains a jhana, the consciousness is moving at the level of another realm of existence. It's moving at the level of the beings in the fine material realm. And so the jhana, the consciousness of a person who attains the jhana, the state of meditative absorption, is the counterpart of the realms of existence or these planes of existence in the rupa dhatu. And so those states of consciousness generated in the jhanic attainment create the kind of karma that leads to rebirth in the fine material realm. And so a person who attains and masters a particular jhana will be reborn in one of these divine planes of existence corresponding to the level of their jhanic attainment. So the 16 planes are actually divided into 4 levels. Which correspond to the 4 jhanas. And then what's characteristic in the fine material realm is that the grosser types of sensory experience have vanished. They're absent. So the level of experience there, it's extremely subtle, very, let's say, very exalted level of experience. So the basic level of consciousness in the fine material realm is the level of consciousness attained in the jhanic meditative absorptions. So the beings in the fine material realm normally remain absorbed in the bliss and tranquility of the jhanas, not all the time, but that's the basic level of their consciousness. Okay, beyond the fine material realm, there is another still higher realm of existence called the arupa dhatu, which is the immaterial realm or the formless realm. Now, in the fine material realm, matter still continues to exist, but it's a subtle kind of matter. The grosser kinds of matter that we find in the sensory realm are absent in the fine material realm. But when one moves from the fine material realm to the immaterial realm, in the immaterial realm, matter is completely absent. There's just consciousness or mind existing in that realm. And the immaterial realm, it consists of 4 planes of existence. And these 4 planes of existence correspond to certain meditative attainments called the formless absorptions or immaterial absorptions. And so human beings human beings who are very diligent meditators can attain the formless absorptions. And when they're in the formless absorption, their consciousness corresponds to the basic state of consciousness of the beings in the immaterial realm. And so a meditator who masters the formless absorptions, one or another of the 4 formless absorptions, is creating the conditions for rebirth in the immaterial realm. And when that meditator passes away, if they still have mastery of that formless meditation, that formless absorption, when they pass away, their mind will take rebirth in the immaterial realm of existence, in the realm that most closely corresponds to the level of meditation that they've mastered. Okay, so these are the 3 realms of existence: the sensory realm or desire realm, the fine material realm or form realm, and the immaterial realm or formless realm. And so that is what is being referred to here, that these are the 3 kinds of existence, the 3 spheres of existence: sense sphere existence, form sphere existence, formless sphere existence. So what happens at death is that depending on our karmic accumulations, the stream of consciousness will be directed to one or another of these spheres of existence. So if one has generated unwholesome karma, then the consciousness will be directed towards one of the unhappy destinations in the sense sphere realm. If we have cultivated wholesome karma, good karma of the ordinary types, we call meritorious karma, through the practice of giving, observing precepts, the more elementary types of meditation, then the consciousness will be directed towards one of the good destinations in the sense sphere realm, either coming back to a human existence or taking rebirth in one of the sense sphere heavenly realms. If one has attained and mastered one or another of the jhanas, the meditative absorptions, then the consciousness is directed to the fine material realm of existence, or the form realm of existence. And if one has mastered one or another of the formless absorptions, the consciousness will be directed to existence in the immaterial realm or formless realm. So I call these different vibrational frequencies for consciousness. So our states of consciousness, even as we go about our daily lives, they're operating at different vibrational frequencies. And then through our actions, our activities, we are subtly changing the vibrational frequencies of our consciousness so that at death, the consciousness will move to the predominant or the most appropriate vibrational frequency that we are generating in this life. So that is, consciousness is directed towards one or another of these three spheres of existence, and that existence begins with birth and moves on to aging and death. Okay, so what is it that motivates us to engage in those kind of karmic activities that direct consciousness to one or another of these realms of existence? So this is what the Buddha calls upadana, which is what we translate as clinging. So the word upadana interestingly, the base of it is the word dana, which means giving. But then when we put the prefix a in front of giving, it becomes adana, which means taking. So it turns dana into its opposite, from giving to taking. And then upa gives the idea, the prefix upa, towards oneself. So it's taking towards oneself. So this is what we translate as clinging or grasping. In fact, the commentaries explain upadana as dalha gahana, which means strong grasping. So it's grasping things and taking things towards oneself. And so the sutta enumerates 4 kinds of clinging. So there's clinging to sensual pleasures, clinging to views, then clinging to, here we translate this rules and vows, or I would translate maybe rules and observances, and clinging to a doctrine of self. Okay, so clinging to sensual pleasures, it's obviously clinging to beautiful and attractive forms, sounds, odors, tastes, tactile objects. And the commentary adds also clinging to attractive or lovely mental objects. So clinging with desire to any object of the senses, of the six senses. So this is a kind of expression of greed or attachment. The other three types of clinging are variations, different forms of views. So putting aside clinging to views, clinging to rules and vows, this is the view that by following certain rules or by undertaking certain kinds of ascetic observances, long fasts, sleeping on beds of thorns, standing uninterruptedly, holding up one's arms without interruption. These were some of the ascetic practices that were followed during the Buddha's time. Subjecting one's body to the heat of the fire during the middle of the day, bathing in ice-cold water during the cold season. By following these practices, it's possible to purify one's defilements and attain liberation. So that is a kind of wrong view. And then clinging to a doctrine of self is also a view. It's the view that within this complex of the five aggregates, there is some kind of substantial self. Usually this is explained as the 20 kinds of view of self, which I won't go into this we'll take the elaboration of this later. Okay, then all the other kinds of views, apart from clinging to rules and vows and clinging to a doctrine of self, is included under clinging to views. And the texts mention, especially as clinging to views, the clinging to the view that there is no fruit and result of good and bad actions. In other words, the view that denies the operation of karma. So these are the four kinds of clinging, and then it's through this clinging that one engages in the different karmic activities that direct the stream of consciousness to a new existence. Okay, I think it's time now. At this point, we'll pause and take a little break and then come back and continue the chain of conditions afterwards.